Throughout its sporting history, Australia has produced more than its share of men who've thrived on the competitive brutality of boxing. Les Darcy paved the way. With his boyish charm and his hammering fists, Darcy became a national icon, a symbol of hope for a country ravaged by the dark days of the early 1900s. Jimmy Carruthers, a gentleman outside the ring, possessed a menacing psyche between the ropes that took him all of the way to the world bantamweight crown. Lionel Rose, with enough natural talent to fill the body of a heavyweight, travelled to Japan in obscurity and returned home to adoration befitting a world champion. Johnny Famechon's artistry inside the square ring belied the violent intent of his chosen profession. People clamoured to be a part of the golden years at venues like the Sydney Stadium, to witness the fistic prowess of Vic Patrick and Tommy Burns, fighters who today would be world champions.
And Burns is down.
But while Australia has produced a century of success, in terms of international achievements, Jeff Fenech stands alone. Winning world titles in 3 different weight divisions, he overshadowed the likes of Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns, becoming the first boxer to do this while undefeated. Fenech won his world titles with a savage blend of almost superhuman fitness and a tireless, relentless onslaught that reminded the old-timers of ring legends Harry Greb, Henry Armstrong and Roberto Duran. He was simply fearless between the ropes, carving a destructive path to the top of the boxing world. It's 1942, and the tyrannical Nazi war machine is sweeping all before it. Malta, a tiny island in the Mediterranean, was subjected to some of the worst bombing of the Second World War. In March and April of that year, more German bombs fell on the island country than on London in a whole year during the horrific Blitz. Hardly a single house or family escaped the devastation. Such was the immense bravery of the Maltese people that England's King George VI awarded the tiny nation a collective George Cross, the highest possible civilian award. Jeff Fenech's parents, Paul and Mary, grew up watching Stukas and Spitfires duel in the blue skies above their tiny homeland, and helped search for bodies each morning after the bombing raids. When they came to Australia as post-war immigrants, Paul Fenech was already suffering ill health, and with his mother working to support her husband and 6 children, Jeff grew up largely fending for himself in Sydney's tough inner city.
Growing up here, a lot of people dislike if you're good at any sport, and whenever anybody said anything, we'd always, want to prove that we were better, so we'd always be fighting. Every couple of days I'd be getting into fights with kids younger than myself or older. You just want to prove you're better than the other person. I was always fighting in the park, so as soon as I started going straight, I made sure I left here. A few people I met, Pat Jarvis and Johnny Lewis, they changed my mind.
There was a complaint from some residents down there. I was in the police force and I attended the complaint, and Jeff had these people bailed up in their house, terrified of coming outside because Jeff was out there ready to smack somebody. And there'd been a disagreement in the local park with the kids, and Jeff reacted in his usual way and brought himself on the scene,
Yeah, I got in trouble a few times. As a juvenile, I got locked up for assault. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. We had a couple of fights, and at that time, there were a lot of street violence happening, and there was a big crackdown on the law, and I was 12 years old.
Needing to channel his aggression more constructively, Fenech found his salvation at the Newtown Police Boys Club in Sydney. There he met trainer Johnny Lewis, who bonded with the teenager right from the start.
I was really taken aback by an aura about the guy, and I just thought to myself there and then, if this kid can be disciplined, well, God only knows how far he can go in the sport.
He was everything. Like I said, he was the only man that I listened to. At that stage, he taught me to respect people. I think because of the respect that he gave me, and I gave him whatever he wanted.
Early on, he was raw and his style crude, but his will to win drove him to incredible success. Grantley Keezer, who worked Fenech's corner throughout his championship years, sensed the burning desire within.
He always had that code of loyalty that he wanted to perform well, not just for himself, but for the people who put faith in him. And he really did reward the people that backed him by fulfilling all their ambitions as well.
Those ambitions quickly propelled him to national prominence. And by 1984, Fenech was regarded as an outside chance for Olympic gold at the Los Angeles Games. But in the vague, murky world of international amateur boxing, his Olympic dream was shattered in a highly controversial decision that still hurts 20 years later. After initially being declared the winner of his flyweight quarterfinal against Yugoslav Redzep Redzepovski, an international panel of judges then overturned the decision, which denied him a shot for the gold medal against American Steve McCrory.
As much as I would have loved to have won a medal for Australia and been given the opportunity to fight for a gold medal for Australia, would have meant so much to me. But I think that, like I said, everything happens for a reason, and I came home, I turned professional immediately.
While Fenech rode a wave of mass publicity when he embarked on his career in the paid ranks, only a few hundred people turned up to see his first bout at the Marrickville RSL. Despite his wealth of experience, Fenech's first opponent looked destitute, as he was battered to defeat. It's a moment Fenech recalls with great fondness.
Oh yeah, never forget it, Marrickville RSL against Bobby Williams. This guy had 60, 50 professional fights, saying that he was going to beat me up and this and that. But like I said, Johnny was very confident in what I could do as a professional prior to me turning professional, because I had sparred all these guys and I had no problem handling them. So I don't know where they got the confidence or the cockiness to go out and say that they were going to beat me. But yeah, I let Bobby hit the canvas about 3 times and the fight was over in the second round, I think.
He raced to an Australian title in just his 3rd fight, pounding Queenslander Junior Thompson for the national super flyweight crown. When Fenech overpowered former Australian champion Wayne Mulholland in February 1985, one shrewd observer in the crowd had dreams of making him Australia's first boxing superstar since Johnny Famechon. Bill Mordy was a colourful newspaper reporter, horse racing identity and magazine publisher. With nothing more than $5 in his kick, but with an eye for spotting a good thing, Bill Mordy plunged head-on into the role of Fenech's promoter. He liked what he saw.
Tough, super fit, had a bit of beast in him. Not a devastating puncher, but he threw them that often and they landed with such consistency that you'd feel you'd been run over by a steamroller at the end of it.
In Mordy's first promotion at Sydney's 4,000-seat Hordern Pavilion, Fenech hammered a rugged little Filipino named Rolly Navarro, whose resilience wilted in round 4 under the aggressive Ozzy's blazing attack.
His big advantage was his size and his ability to be able to make the bantamweight limit. He'd walk around the street, stone and a half heavier than bantamweight. Rolly Navarro was a natural. Well, it was David and Goliath when they got to the ring.
Morty had promised Fenech a world title fight if he beat Navarro. With the newly formed International Boxing Federation looking for markets in the Pacific, the promoter unearthed an emerging Japanese fighter, Satoshi Shingaki, who was making his second defence of the IBF bantamweight title. Such was his self-belief, Shingaki was more than happy to fight Fenech in his own backyard. Despite that confidence, he was keen to study Fenech's form.
117.5 pounds.
I watched the video and I got some idea of his good and bad points. I looked at it again to try and study his strong and weak points.
Early on, a combination of Shingaki's southpaw stance and Fenech's lack of experience kept the fight in the balance.
Looking a little bit more busy. Oh, the right hand got through from Shingaki, was a good punch. Fenech momentarily in a little bit of bother. Fenech fights back. Fenech beating Shingaki.
But the young Australian continued to press the action. And as the fight reached the middle stages, Shingaki's title reign was beginning to look shaky.
Oh, the right hand was a ripper from Fenech. It staggered Shingaki, but he fights back the Japanese champion. Another right from Fenech.
Fenech, decked out in green and gold, belted him black and blue.
Fenech's hitting with 3 and 4 right hands.
By the ninth, Fenech sensed Shingaki was all but a spent force.
He's hurt. Shingaki's hurt.
The title was now within reach, but with both the emotional and physical demands of the fight draining the challenger of valuable energy, fatigue was now also a real issue.
Graham, it was the first time in any fight that I've ever been tired. I think that nervous energy and, you know, I think I'd watched too many videos as a young kid as well, like watching Rocky punch the walls and doing all this stuff. I was doing all that stuff in the dressing room, and all of a sudden I got out there and I was tired. But just on sheer adrenaline and you know, my will to win, I just stuck it out there and fought and fought and fought.
He stops it. Fenech is the new world champion. The crowd will say it all.
I don't know if it's a dream come true, because I never dreamed about being a world champion, so it wasn't a dream come true, but it was an amazing feeling.
While Fenech celebrated with his growing legion of fans, Shingaki's management was far from happy with the stoppage, believing their fighter, as the defending world champ, should have been allowed to continue. The boxer himself says he was confused by the stoppage.
Until the match finished, I didn't think I'd lost. I'd fallen a bit behind, and I thought, maybe in the judge's eyes, I had lost. But that was, in fact, part of my strategy, and my plan was to win in the latter half.
Controversy may have surrounded the stoppage, but nothing could take the shine of Fenech's tremendous achievement. In just 6 months and 7 fights, he had completed one of the quickest climbs to a world title in boxing history.
I mean, I outrated the Logies the first time in TV history. So it was a big thing. This little kid from America, like I said. After that fight, I remember this. I got paid $20,000 to fight for the title, and I said to my best friend Peter Matreski, I said, Peter, I've got 20 grand. I said, if I get another 20, Peter, I'm going to retire. I told him, I said, if I get $20,000 more, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to stop. And it was the start of, you know, of a great career.
While negotiations for a Shingaki rematch got underway, Fenech, who was still a novice despite being a world champ, needed to remain active. Realising this, Bill Morty matched him against a pair of top-notch international fighters in 2 non-title bouts. Fenech returned to the Sydney Hordern Pavilion to stop a tough Filipino named John Matienza.
Round 6. He can't take much more, the young Filipino.
His defiant gesture only encouraged more punishment.
He's down, and Fenech gave him one to go on with as he went down. And that'll be it. Come here. It's all over. Jeff Fenech has knocked out John Matienza in the 6th round.
The following month, that great old house of stoush, the Brisbane Festival Hall, was the venue for Fenech's fight against gritty Englishman John Farrell. Farrell had never been knocked down.
Whereas normally you get the southpaw.
The Englishman came from Liverpool, the city that produced the Beatles. However, it was the Ozzy pounding out a relentless tune, providing the crowd with his own version of a hard day's night.
10 seconds to go in the round. Oh, the right hand was a ripper. 2, 3, 4. That's it. 5, 6, 7. Narrow gets to his feet, but the right hand was a boomer. That's it.
Fenech mania was gaining a crescendo of admiration.
At the end, after I knocked him down a couple of times, the referee just about held him down, didn't let him get up. He was trying to get up again. So I was happy the referee stopped it because he was quite messed up.
Incredible performance by Jeff Fenech, and also a very gutsy, determined display by John Farrell. I mean, he's no slouch, that's for sure.
Fenech then set himself for his 3rd fight in just 4 months, the rematch with Satoshi Shingaki. It was a fight built on controversy. Although he'd taken a thorough belting in the first bout, the ex-champ headed into the rematch believing he could regain his world crown.
Shingaki trying to take the fight up to Fenech. Fenech has got blood on his chest from, he's cut Shingaki in the eye. Shingaki's in trouble. The right hand from Fenech staggered him.
But a badly damaged eye destroyed any chance of revenge. At the end of round 3, the referee halted the fight.
That's it.
Shingaki throws down the towel in disgust. The Japanese complaining again. But really, Shingaki had given more blood than the average blood donor would give in 12 months. A terrible
Shingaki may have had the heart of a champion, but he lacked the skills to back it up. Fenech had proved the doubters wrong, and he was more than happy to let them know.
Like I said, this belt's mine, and nobody's taking it off me, nobody.
Shingaki's career petered out after the 2nd loss to Fenech. And while he'll never be mentioned in the same breath as the greats of the bantamweight division, in his mind, 2 contrasting moments defined his career.
One is to have been a champion. The other is to have gone to Australia twice and lost twice.
It's Shingaki's credit, let me tell you something. They might say he wasn't a great champion, but he had more pride than anybody else I fought. He had more heart and pride than anybody I fought. Because in the 2nd fight, I hit him with some of the best punches I've ever thrown, and he was still standing there.
Fenech was now an emerging talent on the international boxing scene. But he knew a battle with the vastly experienced and much feared American Jerome Coffey had been mandated by the IBF. With Fenech needing to hone his skills before sampling the strong Coffey, American Kenny Butts, who'd gone the distance with Olympic champ Steve McCrory, arrived in Brisbane to face the young champ.
He had a guy called Fred Jenkins as a trainer in Chicago. And I think Fred had found himself on the wrong side of the debt collectors. His phone had been cut off, and the only way he could contact him was at 11 o'clock at night in Chicago on a public telephone box in the street. I thought, what have we let ourselves in for here? Anyway, we made a series of calls to this mystery phone box, and out came Kenny Butts.
Butts may have been cocky, but his time in Australia was rocky, to say the least. To prevent him coming in light at the weigh-in, rocks were put in his pockets. And after round one, the crowd could have been forgiven for thinking those rocks were now in his head.
I didn't know what to do. I was embarrassed. You know, and, I'm up in Brisbane Festival Hall. At that stage it was, the fight capital of Australia. They love their fights up there, and I just had a great fight against John Farrell there. And now we get this guy Kenny Butts, and he just gets out of the ring and goes.
And we sort of ran out of Festival Hall at 100 mile an hour, chased by angry Queenslanders. Yeah, that was Kenny Butts.
But that was soon forgotten as the showdown with the gifted Jerome Coffey loomed. Coffey believed he should have been the man to challenge Shingaki, not Fenech. Coffey was like a double-shot espresso, hot and strong with a real kick. He arrived full of bravado, predicting the young Australian's days as world champ were numbered.
I was extremely confident. I was 26-0. The champion, Shingaki, wouldn't fight me. Jeff wasn't in a hurry to fight me. He was in a mandatory situation. He had to fight me. And he couldn't fight anybody else until he fought me. And so I thought that I was in a pretty unique position, except I had to fight him in his backyard. That concerned me a bit. But I had been there before, and I wasn't so concerned that he could do anything to me that anybody hadn't did before.
Based on an impressive series of victories against top-class opposition, the American's confidence was well-founded.
Without a doubt, when I got there, it was coffee time. I made it clear from the opening bell that when I got there, that Jeff was holding what was already mine, and he was just borrowing the world title.
It was a sellout. It outgrossed Bruce Springsteen at the box office. It was the biggest box office for the entertainment centre back then. So it was big. Like I said, this guy thought he was going to just come over here and and take that belt home. He's a really cocky guy.
Coffey was regarded as one of the best fighters pound for pound in the United States. And if you look at that fight, Jeff really sat on the jab and out-jabbed a bloke that was reportedly had the best jab in boxing.
That snake-like jab and clever boxing skills served him well in the early stages.
Yes, good combination there by Coffey. Left underneath and right over the top. Another right by Coffey and a couple of other cuts. Oh, another couple of good punches from Coffey.
It became clear that Fenech would need more than just raw talent to overcome the gifted American.
Another good left and another from Fenech. A right and another left and right. And Coffey's in trouble over in the neutral corner.
As the fight wore on, Fenech's unrelenting pressure and physical strength began to take their toll.
Well, there we go. Oh, good punches by Jeff Fenech. Good combination, left and right. Oh, big punches from Fenech, and he's after his man once more. Coffey trying to fight back now, and he lands a good right.
The Australians' diversity in attack was now the dominating force.
And I didn't think he'd have the strength left to throw that one, but it was a beautiful right.
It's the first time I'd gone past 8 or 9 rounds, so all of a sudden I'm in deep water. I'm 10, 11, and that's when up here starts telling you, can you do it?
Coffey on the road. Oh, brilliant fight. 15. The contest is all over. It's all over.
Coffey did put a couple of rounds in the bank, but according to the judges, Fenech had a mortgage on the result.
By unanimous decision, retaining his International Boxing Federation Bantamweight Championship of the World, Jeff Fenech.
Yes, a unanimous decision in favour of Jeff Fenech. So Jeff Fenech is still the Bantamweight Champion of the world.
To this day, Coffey remains adamant he was robbed.
Jeff and I, we bumped into each other from time to time since that fight while I was in Vegas. And he'd always say, I'd have did a lot better if your dad wasn't the referee, which was Rudy Battle. And I always say to him, I would have did a lot better if all your uncles wasn't judging the fight. So, I mean, one gets the other. So what are you going to do?
While Coffey and Fenech will always debate the result, nobody can argue against the fact victory gave the Australian the international credibility he so keenly desired. In the eyes of the boxing world, he was now a fully fledged world champion. Morty and Lewis now felt Fenech could beat any bantamweight in the world. Selecting Daniel Zaragoza as the next opponent symbolised that confidence. The street-hardened Mexican southpaw, who was a former world champ, remembers he had a far from flattering opinion of Fenech before the fight.
Jeff Fenech was a loser that was making a lot of noise. I thought that I could even knock him out. When I arrived in Australia, I was convinced of it.
At 28, Zaragoza had been a pro boxer for 6 years before facing Fenech in Perth. Don Majeski, who was Fenech's matchmaker, knew this fight would enhance Fenech's growing reputation with the more powerful governing body, the World Boxing Council.
Daniel Zaragoza was a guy, it's interesting there because he had just lost the WBC bantamweight title and we wanted to get Jeff some recognition in WBC.
We were led to believe that Zaragoza was spent, it was past him and everything like that, and such was that we took the fight. But if Jeff Fenech wasn't the fighter that he was, then it would have been an awful mistake. But Jeff won every round.
Fenech's got him in the blue corner. Zaragoza gets one on the jaw, another right cross on the jaw, another right cross on the jaw from Fenech.
Knowing that so much rode on the outcome, both men fought with a passionate intensity.
Fenech with a beautiful left cross.
At times, the contest looked more like a barroom brawl. It featured as many elbows and headbutts as it did legitimate punches.
And he gave me 10 of the hardest rounds I've ever had. I hit him and hit him and hit him and hit him, and he never stopped. He never stopped coming. He never stopped, throwing punches. It was without doubt to that stage my toughest fight, much tougher than going 15 rounds. He was a different calibre of opponent. Although Jerome Coffey was slick and skillful and pretty to watch, Daniel Zaragoza was a real fighter in the terms of the word fighter.
And there's the bell. It's all over. Very good fight indeed. Jeff Fenech has really done a wonderful job here.
I think he's the strongest boxer I've met. I had bloody bouts with Banky, Jacobs, who also beat me, and with Hatanaka. But with Jeff Fenech, it was a very, very tough bout because he's so strong. I think it's right to say he's the best from Australia, and his 3 world titles in 3 different divisions are proof of it.
The evidence now pointed towards Olympic revenge. The focus of that vengeful obsession was Steve McCrory, the gold medalist in Fenech's weight class at the 1984 LA Games. McCrory had learnt his craft on the streets of Detroit, a tough working-class city that gave the world mass-produced cars and Motown records. He was coached by one of the world's most respected trainers, Emmanuel Stewart.
Take it to him now. The left hook is working good. Just take it to him, and when you get through with that push it.
Amid the crime and poverty of Detroit, Stewart turned his Kronk Gym, an inner-city recreation centre, into the most famous boxing gymnasium in the world. At different times, he'd worked with some of the best fighters on the planet, including the phenomenal Thomas the Hitman Hearns. Perhaps concerned his dancing skills reflected his boxing ability, Stewart had reservations about putting McCrory in the ring against the rampaging Ozzy assassin.
Perfectly honest with you, I did not want that fight at that time. It was Stevie and I had a big argument, and he insisted on the fight. I would have rather waited another year because even though Stevie was the gold medal winner in the Olympics, Jeff Fenech had progressed so much professionally, and with his pure strength and his animal instincts, I felt honestly that it was going to be too much for Stevie. But McCrory said, hey, I want to fight, either I want to get a new manager. So we took the fight.
Stewart's concerns would have been eased if he'd known about the problems facing Team Fenech in the weeks leading up to the fight. Firstly, Fenech broke his hand. And then, believing the fight was off, he'd gone on a feeding frenzy. That soon gave way to panic when a distraught Bill Morty called saying the fight was back on. Weight was now the issue.
We ended up at Penrith at a health resort, one of those slimming factories. And I guess I'd be the skinniest ever to appear as a regular. You couldn't smoke in the place. And there were all these ladies who really weren't all that big, but mentally they wanted to be thinner. And I'd crack jokes with them. They said, how did you, what are you doing here? I said, oh, I was 20 stone when I got here. And they said, how long have you been here? I said, a week. I said, oh, how'd you do it? I said, well, you come to my room tonight, I'll show you. But no one did.
Nerves were frayed when the undefeated McCrory arrived in Australia, talking up his chances to put the cocky Aussie in his place. That tension spilled over at the weigh-in at the Sydney Entertainment Centre.
Want you to weigh again.
Stewart was unhappy with what he saw as a fiasco.
When I'm up against you in this minute, I can do this or whatever. Steve McCrory weighed in, he stood back and let the people see him weigh.
Jeff Fenech never made the weight, but he did so much sacrificing, starving, and I would say just torturing his body that I have no regrets about the fact that he probably came in the fight a little heavier than McCrory and probably never made the weight because he jumped on the scale, someone jumped in front of us, he jumps off, and they said, I think 122 or whatever it was, and that was it, and they wouldn't even let us see the scales.
I wasn't overweight, but I wasn't, you know, it was just, you know, and the official at the time said, Jeff Fenech, you know, 8 stone 6 I'd made weight. So I jumped off, and as soon as I jumped off, I tucked into my mum's past, and my mum was crying when she seen me that day. When she see my face, she was crying. And I was eating and drinking, and all of a sudden, Manuel Stewart, being the professional that he is, said, I want him back on the scales. I said, what? You never made us? What do you mean I never made that? And now they're talking. And he's got the IBF talking to him about me having to get back on the scales. It was too late. I'd already put on 4 pound in about 5 minutes.
Once in the ring, it became clear McCrory's pre-fight confidence was well-founded. He was fast, tough and clever, and he could punch.
Just tried the right hand and came back with a good combination of punches there, McCrory.
In the 6th and 7th rounds, Steve McCrory landed some big shots. Jeff started to get a little bit weary. You could see his legs a little bit buckling a little bit under the weight of having to make the weight. But McCrory fired his best shots in those rounds, and it still wasn't enough to put Jeff away. He landed some good punches, but Jeff wasn't going to be beaten that night, not with Olympic revenge on his mind.
I cannot believe, Jeff, where Fenech is getting all this energy from.
Showing the courage and spirit that became his trademark, he weathered the McCrory onslaught. By the 14th round, the American's resistance had been pounded out of him.
My relentless pressure just slowly wore him down. I hit him and hit him and hit him, and like I said, my hands were killing me at the time. And come about 10 rounds, I knew that I was right on top. He had nothing left. 11, the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th round, I hit him with a straight right hand to the body, and he went down. And I was so cranky as he was going down, I was trying to punch him on the back of the head with both hands and knock him down again, you know. So I wanted him to stay there. I didn't want him to get back up. Got back up, and you bastard, stay down. And I'm in pain. I was dying, you know. Anyway, straight away when the referee counted, I jumped back on him, start punching him, and the referee stopped the fight. For me, it was a huge relief because, like I said, not only was it Olympic revenge, but like I said, I just remembered that Australia embraced me and loved me because they thought that this guy had taken what was Jeff Fenech's. And for me to beat him in front of that crowd and to beat him the way I did, it was always one of the special fights for me.
I'm doing a book of my life story, and Jeff Fenech is very prominent in the book. But he is the perfect example of what I use for the title of my book, which is that champions are made on the inside. You have to have toughness, and Jeff was the epitome of toughness.
British-born Tony Miller had lost to Fenech in the amateurs, but as a pro, he was one of the roughest, toughest fighters in Australia after a series of big wins in his adopted home of Melbourne. Miller had pushed former world champ Lester Ellis through 10 close rounds before facing Fenech in front of 7,000 screaming fans at the Glass House in Melbourne in April 1987.
He first moved up to featherweight, so I mean, you could say, yeah, I'm quite proud of the fact that I went the distance with the three-time world champ at his peak. He was knocking everybody else out. I was on 2 weeks' notice, and I went the distance. So I suppose if you look back on it, it's something to be proud of, yeah.
I had great respect for Tony Miller. We fought him for the right to go to the Olympics, and it was a very tough and close encounter. And it was most probably Jeff's hardest fight as an amateur. I think, you know, he was a good boy. He was world class.
It was a tough fight. It was the perfect preparation for me to fight Samar Payakaroon for my second world title. I just done 12 grueling rounds with Tony Mad Dog Miller, who, like I said, is one of the most respected fighters in this country, one of the best fighters that we've had. He was a great fighter.
And a standing ovation for both boys from this huge crowd at the Melbourne Sports and Entertainment Centre. They certainly got their money's worth. Two great fighters.
Growing in confidence and physique, it was now time to take on even bigger challenges. Fenech planned to move up one weight division to super bantamweight in a bid for 2 world titles, something no Australian boxer had ever achieved. Thailand draws tourists from around the world. With its attractions many and varied, it has an international feel that caters for every taste. It also has a tradition of producing hardened fighting men. And they didn't come any harder than WBC Super Bantamweight champion Samart Payakaroon. If Jeff Fenech was to become a 2-time champ, he would have to overcome the lethal Thai.
Nobody thought I was going to beat him. He had just won the best prospect in the world from the WBC. He had just knocked out 2 Mexican greats. And like I said, I'd fought all the Mexicans, and although I beat him, I wasn't able to knock him out. They had hard heads, but this guy was a very special puncher.
Always concerns when you're fighting a guy like Samart Payakaroon. He'd beaten a couple of very good Mexicans. He'd beaten Juan Meza and Lupe Pintor, who were both exceptional world champions. Even though he hadn't had that many professional boxing bouts, Payakaroon was also a very experienced kickboxer. So he really knew what the tough grind of the fight game was all about. And there was a lot of concern that maybe Jeff had bitten off a little bit more than he could chew against Payakaroon.
The undefeated WBC Super Bantamweight king possessed a potent left hand and a sleek air of arrogance.
Yes, I was confident, about 80%, even though I didn't know anything about Fenech before. No tape, nothing. I couldn't even remember his name until I was there. But before I left for Australia, I had no training practice whatsoever. I spent my time drinking, fooling around, having fun like other boxers.
While Samart was having a good time, some very serious characters were watching from the shadows. Payakaroon's backers were a team of millionaire Thai gamblers, willing to wager their souls on a victory. A group not accustomed to backing a loser.
He had a manager at the time named Sampap, who was a wealthy guy from Thailand and a big bettor. And they came to the gym the first day and they wanted to bet 10,000. And the next day they came back, they wanted to bet another 5. Then they wanted to bet another 5. And it got to the point where they said, well, we want to bet 1. And they were covering the bet, said 1,000, okay. No, 100,000. The entire purse, he was getting 120,000. So at that point, all the bookmakers were going around pooling their the resources to cover this $100,000 bet. And I remember they went to the arena that night with $240,000 in cash.
And Ron Casey was sitting in the front row. And I said, oh, Case, can you do me a favour? Can you mind this parcel for me? And he did. I come back about 15 minutes later, and Case is involved in watching the preliminary fight that's on. And I look down, and here's this 150 or 200,000 cash between his feet. I walked over to him, and I whispered, I said, mate, there's 150,000 between your feet. He used a couple of expletives and then sat on it.
The third man in the ring for this epic showdown was Arthur McCanty, who'd worked fights involving the likes of Floyd Patterson, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, and the greatest, Muhammad Ali. This ageless ring veteran vividly remembers Fenech's fighting style.
Always in very, very good condition and very strong, a ferocious type of fighter, fearless, what other adjective can I use? Relentless, and once he's on you, he'll chase you all over the place till he catches you.
In the early stages, it looked like Payakaroon's gamble to come to Australia would pay off.
And with 14 seconds to go, he's put a count on him.
For the first time in his professional career, Fenech was on the canvas. While many believe he shouldn't have received a count, McCanty maintains he made the right decision.
That's the end of round one with Fenech going out for the count there, and the crowd don't like it.
I remember that vividly. Payakaroon is a southpaw. He had a tremendous right, we would call it a right cross for southpaw. But as he was coming in, he was hit solidly with that right cross. And that's what, and then he went down. I know a lot of people thought perhaps it might have been due to something slippery in the ring, or they didn't consider it a knockdown, but I definitely defend myself on that decision, really.
I got a count put on me for the first time in my career, but listen, I never even got hit. It was just, I was off balance. The referee seen it differently, which is fine. I just get up and do the job.
In the first two furious rounds, Payakaroon had shown moves not seen since the fleet-footed era of Johnny Famechon.
He does move well.
However, by the fourth, the challenger was in complete control.
Has got Payakaroon in the corner and in a lot of trouble. I said he won't go.
The fight was slowly being punched out of the Thai boxer by the unrelenting Fenech assault.
Lefts and right hands from Fenech to the body, then to the head. He's got him back against the ropes. He's hitting him with everything.
If you asked me if his fist was heavy, I could say no. It wasn't heavy, but it just kept coming. No matter where I tried to cover myself, it still kept coming. I was really discouraged at the time. So at the beginning of the fourth round, I thought, this is it, my fate against his. So I waited for the chance to strike back, and I thought if I hit right where I wanted to, I might be able to make it. After that, I don't know what happened. I passed out and woke up in an ambulance.
But courage alone was no match for Fenech's eagerness to inflict a crushing victory.
He's hitting Payakaroon at will now. The Thai boxer is down. He's out. It's finished. It's over. Fenech is the winner. Fenech is the world champion. Payakaroon is finished. What a the world champion. The world non-title champion in the super bantamweight. History here made tonight.
For Jeff Fenech, life had never been so good. He was now a history-making sports star, idolised by a nation.
It was hard because, like I said, when you've had nothing and, you know, all of a sudden I'm driving a Saab convertible and, you know, people look at you differently, and, you know, it was difficult. But like I said, I never really got to believe in that stuff at the time because I don't know, I was always on cloud nine. You know, when you're doing them things, I don't know. I can't think back to think how it felt because I don't know if I really believed it was true, if it was just a dream. You know, it was amazing.
We just watch that again, eh?
Contrasting Fenech's elation, Payakaroon returned to Thailand in disgrace. Thousands of his countrymen had lost what little money they had backing their hero.
When I lost and came home, Thai people scolded me, accusing me of betraying my own country. The truth is, I wasn't paid to lose.
Payakaroon described this period as the worst time in his life. Shattered by the experience, he sought solace in a Buddhist monastery.
We thought it was the only way to calm people down. Thai people wouldn't dare scold monks because it's sinful. The rumour was very strong at the time. A temple was the best solution. And after I resigned from the monkhood, I then had to swear in front of the Emerald Buddha. All the reporters were there. I had to swear that I didn't betray my profession.
Fenech is just like a mini raging bull.
Next on the Fenech hit parade was Greg Richardson, nicknamed the Flea.
Oh, he's really raining it into Richardson now. The American doesn't know what to do.
Fenech was like a pest exterminator, eradicating the American inside 5 rounds.
This guy has good right hands to blow up, and he got hit right hand. He's hurt. Richardson continues to hang on.
Bad choice of opponent. Yeah. But then again, it's also an acclaim to Fenech's ability in the ring. He can make anybody look bad. I think too, when the guys with the smaller physiques look up, it's basically David against Goliath, but Goliath wins.
Fenech is all over. He's in real trouble, real trouble. Fenech was going to hit him on the way down. Richardson will get back up though. He's cut. He's badly cut over the left eye. And if his second gets into the ring, the fight's over. He better get out of the ring. He's going to quit. I don't think he wants it. That's it. It's over. He doesn't want it anymore. Well, he doesn't want it anymore. Jeff Fenech in his first defense. Very spectacular, very strong.
While the Flea possessed little power, Fenech's next opponent, Carlos Zarate, was celebrated as one of the greatest punchers in boxing history. At one time in his career, the Mexican boasted an undefeated record in 51 fights, 50 by KO. Although he'd retired from the fight game in 1979, he had won 12 fights on the comeback trail, 10 by KO.
Because he's a legend. He's a legend throughout every era. Like, you know, he was one of the all-time greats, and he'd made a comeback. He was like 30 when I fought him. Today, 30's not old, but back then it was classified as old. And he always says that the only fighter that he fought in his comeback that could have fought in any era and been successful was Jeff Fenech. And to get that accolade from such a great fighter, certainly it makes me proud.
It was little wonder Zarate was so impressed by Fenech, as the Australian went on a seek and destroy mission.
He's down. Zarate is down. Will they put the count on him this time? Yes. The crowd berserk.
Zarate was back up as the count reached 3.
Fenech is cut. Fenech was cut over his right eye.
Zarate was probably saved from further embarrassment when Fenech sustained a nasty cut.
The headbutt. 1 point penalty for him if I stop it, okay?
The fight was stopped soon after, and initially Zarate thought he'd won.
Hey, the fight has stopped. The fight has been stopped. Zarate figured he had won the fight.
What's happening?
But you will find,
Order was soon restored. The scorecards tallied, and with Fenech clearly ahead, he was awarded a technical decision.
And the fight will go to Jeff Fenech. This is controversy.
I felt sorry that we had to fight him, you know, because I knew that what Jeff would do to him, and it's not a good thing to get into a ring and feel sorry for the other guy, but Jeff only hit him once really and nearly killed him.
Fenech was now aiming to cement his place in boxing folklore by doing what no fighter had ever done. There had been 3-time world champions, such as Sugar Ray Leonard and Henry Armstrong, but none had captured a triple world crown while undefeated.
Well, an interesting thing for people
To help
to
him
watch
prepare for
is
his
this fight.
assault on the featherweight title, Fenech faced an honest little scrapper from Argentina, Osmar Avila, who was expected to test the Australian at the 57-kilo limit.
At any stage. He's done it before in his career, a career spanning 43 fights, and he's down in the first round.
There was a body punch. There was a body punch. We'll see the body punch on the replay. You'll see the body punch on the replay. There was a body punch that went in. Very disappointing. Very disappointing. Rated 10th in the world, this guy. Rated 10th in the world, 43 fights. He's only lost 2. He had 2 draws, 1 no decision.
He had never been stopped, Gus, and he has been stopped with inside the first round by Jeff Fenech in his first international featherweight contest. The crowd will not like this, but Jeff Fenech put him down.
That's boxing, you know, like people love to go and watch it. In the bigger guys, when little guys fight, they love you to, you know, put on a 12-round war, and that's what I was used to, and that's what I expected that night. But I hit him with such a clean shot that the fight was over in 1 round.
The sun-kissed island of Puerto Rico is perhaps the most dazzling jewel among the gems of the Caribbean, with exotic hideaways and miles of white sandy beaches. It's also a breeding ground for men who thrive on the competitive spirit of boxing, producing fighters like Wilfred Benitez and Felix Trinidad. Keen to add his name to that proud boxing tradition, big-punching Victor Calleja knew a victory over Fenech would elevate him to Puerto Rico's boxing elite as a 2-time world champ. The significance of the bout was not lost on the WBC, which assigned its premier referee, Richard Steele, to oversee the fight. The Las Vegas-based ref, whose energy today is devoted to encouraging young kids to learn the disciplines of boxing, knew both Fenech and Calleja had a reputation for bending the rules.
Both of them was doing the same amount of, you know, elbows, head butting and everything. I let it go. I just let it go because neither one of them was getting the best of the other by their tactics, by their fouls or whatever, you know. I let it go to make the fight, and that's what it was. It was a fight. It was a brutal fight.
I have seen in Calleja's...
And it was a beautiful punch that Calleja unleashed with perfect precision in the first round.
A left hook, and that one shook Fenech up just a little bit. It comes back, Calleja just does with another left hook.
After I saw he withstood that punch, I went to my corner and asked, am I fighting a human being or what? I'm not going to say I was frustrated because I wasn't. I knew I could hit him again at one time or another. And then he wouldn't withstand it again. But he did. He withstood everything I threw at him.
Oh, Jeff Fenech really giving it to Callejas at the moment.
Fenech quickly regained his composure, and thriving on the inside, he went about methodically dismantling the Puerto Rican.
It certainly is, and he's...
Oh, 1-2, what a beautiful 1-2. And he's down, he's down, he's down. And the bell fades him. Here's the count. They're going to count. There, he's up before he's taken the compulsory 8 count. The count. Oh, there's the bell. He hasn't heard the bell. He hasn't heard the bell.
And Jeff Fenech is really moving in. The miracle mauler at his best there. Jeffrey Fenech, listen to the fans, and what a mighty round for Jeff Fenech.
During the fight, Calleja showed Fenech little respect. Even today, the Australian is still amazed at how dirty the fight was.
Right by Jeff Fenech there.
Did you see Calleja just try another butt? Fenech came in with a forearm jolt then to even it up.
Yeah, he certainly did. A good left by Fenech, and he may not have enough time. Oh, there's a butt by Fenech, and both fighters there butting. Jeff Fenech.
In the end of round 1, round 2, he headbutted me, he broke my nose, I headbutted him back. It became one of the dirtiest fights in boxing history. I mean, if you watch it and you count the elbows that were thrown in the fight, I think it would far surpass any other fight ever, maybe 3 or 5 times the amount of elbows in a fight. The headbutts were the same, the low blows were the same. He actually, on 3 or 4 occasions, dug his thumb down the back of my eye, you know, trying to do all them things to upset me. And although to this day I say I admire the man for that, because he done anything he had to do to win. I admire him for that. I was pretty cranky. I was pissed off after the fight because I even wanted to, when the fight was over and I knocked him out, I wanted to go and kill him in the dressing room. I was still that cranky because I knew what he'd done to me. He headbutted me and he'd elbowed me and continually done it. I was very, very, I was very mad. I was fired up at the end of the fight.
Mincer, he feels as though at this moment he's run over by a steamroller.
Yes. Oh, great punches by Fenech. 4 punches. He now throws him around.
While Fenech is critical of Richard Steele's handling of the fight, many felt that this only added to the drama of what was an extraordinary contest.
But he's hurt, Jeff. He's hurt.
Oh, he's in terrible trouble.
He did. I guess he figured, look, guys, if this is the way you want to go at it, go ahead. Because I think he felt if he kept reprimanding them, he would end up having to disqualify one or the other. And as I said, it was such a competitive fight, such a brawl, that it would have been a shame. And as I say, if Fenech was content to fight that way, and Callejas was, I guess Richard Steele figured, go ahead, let the best man win.
Jeff Fenech and Victor Callejas. Good left by Jeff Fenech, and he's again into Victor Callejas, up against the rope. There's the body punch. Back goes...
It's all over. It's all over. Callejas is done. He's done it.
He's done it. In round 10 has won the fight. You take it, Case.
Okay. Well, I must say that was a marvellous performance by Jeff Fenech. He stayed there. He showed how strong he was all the time, and Callejas was gone.
Jeff Fenech had made history. He was now the WBC featherweight champion and the first man to hold world titles in 3 different weight divisions without suffering defeat along the way.
I could have, you know, stopped at any time, made an excuse, because he hit me with some big punches, but I think it was a real defining moment of my career, being able to do what I'd done against that quality of an opponent, with the pain that I went through, and with the circumstance. I think it was one of my greatest performances.
But amid the euphoria, Fenech made a startling admission.
Broke my my right hand prior to the fight, and I didn't tell Johnny, because usually I didn't keep much from Johnny, but I knew Johnny wouldn't let me fight against that guy with the hand, because he knew how we knew it was going to be my toughest fight. And so I was getting treatment every day and stuff, and then the night of the fight I said, you don't need needles, because I'd got needles on. I didn't tell him. But yeah, if you watch the fight closely, after about 3 rounds, 90% of my punches are all with the left hand. My left hand's, 30% of the power that my right hand has, so it became a very difficult fight. And I promise you, after that fight, I made front pages of paper that I was in hospital. It was all that election stuff where they never got me into hospital on time, but I stayed in the hospital all night, and I'm not just saying this, I was in tears. I've never been in so much pain. Lucky a couple of my friends were there with me to hold my hand and put it in hot water and ice, and I've never been in that much pain in my life. It was the worst I'd ever felt. My hands that day were totally wrecked.
Callejas too was feeling pain. The pain of being denied his 2nd world title. However, he has nothing but praise for his conqueror.
A good fighter, an excellent fighter, and a great human being. Unfortunately, after so many years, I haven't seen him again. I saw him on the day of the fight, and I didn't see him again. I'd like to see him and embrace him. He really is a great human being and a great boxer.
Also impressed, sitting at ringside, was Carl King, the stepson of promoter Don King. Soon he would be putting together a super fight between Fenech and Azuma Nelson, known around the world as the Mighty Warrior. Now considered one of the best pound-for-pound fighters on the planet, Jeff Fenech was the toast of the boxing world. But while he was in full control of his destiny inside the ropes, on a personal level, he was to suffer a devastating blow. Only days after the Callejas win, his father Paul, aged just 56, finally succumbed to heart disease that had plagued him for nearly half his life. Supported by an army of friends, especially his best mate, Peter Matrevsky, Fenech would learn to live with his father's death. Perhaps the finest example of the soft heart that lies beneath Fenech's tough exterior is his relationship with Con Spiropoulos, an intellectually handicapped neighbour who Jeff befriended as a teenager. Throughout his 3 title reigns, Con travelled to all the champion's big fights as the unofficial mascot and cheerleader. Even today, he's never far from Jeff's side.
I get much more satisfaction out of seeing Con every day, rather than I walk in my trophy room and see those belts which really mean not much to me. Con is and will always be a major part of my life. got an affinity with him where I love him like he's my own son.
Although his hands were still damaged goods, 5 months after stopping Kaleha, Fenech made the first defence of his WBC featherweight title against Trinidad's Tyrone Downs.
Look, they're going mad. The stadium, the Melbourne people, have a shot of this. They're going around in a continuous wave, around and around the stadium. Follow it with the camera, and I've never seen anything like this at a boxing contest before. And this, I think, is Melbourne's way of saying, Jeff Fenech, we love you. Exactly.
Meantime, in America, more than 30 million people were given the chance to see what all the fuss was about, and the showdown was beamed back to the States on the CBS network.
Australia's Rocky, which is also an apt description of his rise to the top.
Commonwealth champ Downs might have lacked sting in his punch, but he was a clever boxer who many felt would cause Fenech some concern.
No, he looks pretty good, but of course...
Another guy who they thought was flashy and stuff, but again, it didn't take me too long, Graham. I just cut the ring off, and he didn't want to fight me either after a couple of rounds.
Yes, a slight cut above Fenech's eyebrow. That's not a good start, not in the first round, Peter Peters.
No, it's certainly not.
But after the first, Downs would have been very keen to fight on. A head clash sent Fenech to his corner with a terrible cut over his eye.
There is big trouble here tonight for Jeffrey Fenech. The doctor's getting into the ring, and this fight could be stopped.
The Aussie literally saw red and went about snuffing out the Downs challenge with a combination of pressure and punches. The American TV executives were delirious with the ferocity of Fenech's style.
Fenech is completely in control now. There's no doubt about it. It's a matter of when now. The drama has gone out of it.
The shoulder into Tyrone Downs, and Downs looking at his corner for help. Jeff Fenech chasing his foe now in Tyrone Downs. Oh, he stopped it.
Left hook started it, and then he followed through the right. Downs will get up. Yes, here he's up.
The road could save him 25
seconds to go.
Jeff Fenech after him in the
needs another punch.
Round 4. Jeff Fenech has got him on the run. Down
16 seconds.
He's lining him up. 14. He's not going to have the time in this round. Round 4 as he peppers Tyrone down. In the corner, chasing him. The shoulders.
What a great comeback by Fenech.
And down he's down.
He's down. And Fenech actually hit Downs when he was down. And Downs has signalled he doesn't want to go on with it. The blood is coming down Fenech's eye again, but the bell has rung, and no one knows it. No one knows. The bell has rung. The bell has...
There's the bell. What a great round for Jeff Fenech. Round 4, and the champion is in full flight. I doubt if Tyrone... It's a long way from Trinidad, and what can he do, Tyrone?
And back to the body. Oh, what a body punch. And that was it. A right to the body. Fenech knew it. He picked it. He threw the right to the body, and it's all over. He's not going to get up.
9. He's up. He's up at 9.
He does.
The referee, Steve Crossan, said, do you want to go on? Oh, and let's see what Tyrone Downs can do. Fenech now, after these targets.
The difference, Downs.
He's down again.
That's got to be the end of it.
That's over. Jeff Fenech in round 5. Jeff Fenech in round 5 retains the World Boxing Council Featherweight Championship of the world. Ron Casey.
Oh, that was magnificent. It had all the drama. It had everything.
Moments after extending his undefeated run to 21 straight victories, Fenech talked about the challenges ahead.
Well, definitely that's my ultimate dream, was to win 4 world titles and be the first, but Thomas Hearn's done that, so yeah, I'll have to just slowly win a few more featherweight fights and then go up and make it number 4.
While 4 world titles was his dream, reality stood before him 3 months later in the form of the highly rated Georgie Gogo Navarro. Fast, hard-hitting, and with an air of confidence fueled by predictions he was the next Sugar Ray Leonard, Navarro's verbal sparring with Fenech ensured there'd be a good crowd on hand at fight time.
I always believe I'm the best in order to see my career. That's why right now I believe I'm tougher than him.
Navarro may have thought he could gain the upper hand with such antics before the opening bell, but his ego and his challenge were soon floundering on the ropes.
Navarro missing now. Fenech pings him with a left. He gets him in his own blue corner, and down goes Navarro in the opening part of round 4. Navarro down, and he shakes his hand.
Weakened by a battle to make the 57-kilogram limit, the American had to plant his feet and slug it out with the division's most dangerous finisher.
Fenech presses on in this dynamic fourth round. Left to the right. Fenech was stung with the left. He's got Navarro in the neutral corner. They'll fight their way out of it. Fenech gets his right hand three. Three right hand punches by Fenech. Fenech wheels him back around just like a baby doll. Left and right to the body. Navarro tries to open up. Fenech still presses home the advantage. Left and right to the body. And Fenech pressing home as Navarro has his back to the race. And McCanny comes in to stop.
Everybody thought he was going to beat me. Sugar Ray Leonard had just signed him up. He had just won the whole US tournament. He'd every place fought off, and he won the best featherweight out of all of them. He'd fought and beaten the guy who Costa Azul had the tough fight against, Hector Lopez. He beat him in the final to be the recognised as the best featherweight in America. And when they brought him here, they thought he was going to beat me. He was very confident, very cocky, very loud. But after a couple of rounds, if you watch it tape close, after I think the second or third, he didn't want to fight no more. And Jack Rennie, the Australian trainer that was in his corner, said, "Son, you just stop in the corner. This crowd are going to kill you." So he came back out and fought a couple of rounds, and I stopped him in the 5th round. But without doubt, one of the most skillful guy I fought.
Fenech's frenzied assault and superior arsenal forced the Jersey boy to surrender in the 5th.
He goes in for the kill now. In his own corner, George Navarro fighting for his life as Fenech goes after Navarro. Is this the end in round 4? There is no defence now.
1:22 to go, and Navarro's one punch away from being
He stopped it!
Yes, he stopped the fight. Fenech wins in the 5th round. Fenech wins. The fight has been stopped.
Jeff Fenech retains his world featherweight championship with a 5th round stopping of the fight to Jeff Fenech.
Fenech's confidence was now at an all-time high. Rumours of a showdown with Azuma Nelson were gaining momentum. But with the African now defending a world title in the super featherweight division, Fenech would have to wait. But the Australian didn't remain idle, pursuing a match with Nelson's toughest rival, Mexican Marcos Villasana.
I had tremendous self-belief, and at that stage I wanted to fight the best, and knowing that he'd gone the distance with Azuma Nelson twice, had a draw with the other great featherweight, Antonio Esparragosa, and had he not lost 2 points for low blows, he would have been the WBA world champion. I thought, well, this is the benchmark, and I want to fight this guy, and if I beat him, I'll get the credit I deserve.
That credit was mainly due to the fact many believed Villasana had been on the wrong end of 2 bad decisions in 2 world title bouts against Azuma Nelson.
When the bout ended with Nelson, everyone was happy in my corner. They all said I'd won. I told them to wait for the decision because, as you know, when King is around, many things can happen. Don King was Azuma Nelson's agent. That's why I wasn't sure about the result. And then it happened. It was decided by 1 point. What could I do?
The Mexican assassin predicted the showdown with Fenech would be like a train wreck, with the two crashing headlong into each other all night long.
The thing is, Jeff Fenech's style is a bit rough. I mean, he's strong and he has the strength. I remember that he would push me hard. We were the same weight, but yet he pushed me.
To ensure things didn't get too out of hand, veteran referee Joe Cortez was appointed to officiate the fight. Cortez's passion for boxing is reflected in his impressive home gym in Las Vegas, that pays tribute to the legends of the sport. He arrived in Australia knowing that Fenech had a style to match any of those adorning his gym wall.
Fenech was outstanding. I mean, Fenech was really in great condition. If it wasn't for the condition that Jeff Fenech had and always has, he would have probably not won that fight. But the conditioning for Jeff Fenech and his experience and the punching power, the inside fighting, it made him the champion. He was really unbelievable. I was really impressed.
As the fight approached, Fenech still had hand problems and often felt faint in training because of his battle to make the featherweight limit. Knowing that this might be his last fight at 57 kilos, he wanted to go out on a high. But dealing with Villasana's tendency to go low only made this a more gruelling affair.
Yeah, he hit me low many times. I mean, we watched many videos of him, and I think in the pre-fight interview I said that I need to wear 2 ball guards, and I remember that, and maybe I needed to that day. But look, I honestly don't believe he done it on purpose. I believe that because he's such a tough guy and, you know, a proud guy, and he knows that if you kill the body, usually, you know, the rest will follow. He was trying to hit me in the body really hard, and he strayed low on at least, you know, 3-4 dozen occasions, and some of them were quite low and quite painful. But again, when you're out there fighting for your title and for your life, you just, you know, brush that aside and you keep fighting.
Look at Fenech up on his toes. He's trying to draw the Mexican in onto another of those big uppercuts. Oh, Fenech unloading with the hook and right cross there.
The two fighters stayed at each other's throats for 12 rounds,
Villasana was fighting with a desperate
ripping and hooking, rarely giving an inch.
He's feeling now. Oh, he nails Fenech. He's nailed Fenech there. Fenech comes straight back.
And he comes straight back, the sign of a champion, but he walked into that one.
How tough are these guys?
Fenech's tools of the trade were once again broken. However, despite the state of his hands, he continued to punch his way through an excruciating pain barrier.
What a gallant fighter. But look at Jeff Fenech.
One went after about 4 or 5 rounds, then the other one went, and I thought the only way I was going to survive and, you know, not get cleaned up was to get on my toes and box. And I think I was pretty blessed that as a youngster, as an amateur, because I had such limited experience, I used to try to box more than brawl. And I had that boxing skill as well. So, you know, I could box if I needed to box, which I'd done on occasions against Jerome Coffey and so on. And in this fight against Villasana, I needed to box for a couple of rounds while the hands were aching. I needed to give him a bit of a break.
This will be the fight of the year, I'm sure.
That versatility allowed Fenech to pile up the points because of a more accurate and superior work rate.
There'll be no knockout here.
There won't be. Both fighters will go the distance without being off their feet, and how, I'll never know.
When the final bell sounded, the huge crowd rose to their feet.
What a great performance by Fenech, though. Look at him dancing. He can still dance after losing all that weight. Down the end of the fight. What a great fight. Jeff Fenech has retained, I'm sure, his WBC featherweight championship of the world. Look at Fenech and listen to the crowd roar.
By unanimous decision, retaining his WBC featherweight championship of the world, Australia's greatest boxer of any time, Jeff Fenech.
The night that Jeff beat Villasana, I think he would have beat any featherweight ever. I think that I think there was and his hands were sore, and what he did that night was, as I said, I got a big rap on Villasana, and I think that Jeff really showed the world that night, the way he done it. You know, he was, once again, I thought he was at his brilliant best.
For Jeff Fenech, though, the impressive victory over one of the world's most dangerous little men was tempered by the swollen, pulsating mess his hands had once more become. And then came the news that took everyone by surprise.
I'd like to announce today that this is my last fight. I'm now officially retired, and I do recall all my career saying when I do, I'll never come back. I've spoken to my trainer, Johnny Lewis, and like I said, I just want to thank you all, and I think I've had enough.
there is a very distinct possibility that
What
we will
wasn't
have
common knowledge was the behind-the-scenes bickering between his promoter, Bill Morty, and his new management group, IMG.
I never really opted to leave the sport, but I opted to leave it because of the pressure that I felt that Bill Morty and IMG had put on me at that time, and more so Bill Morty, because like I said, if Bill Morty told me they were robbing him, I obviously believed they were robbing him, but as I grow and learn, I don't believe that was the case. I believe they were looking after Jeff Fenech, but again, you live and learn.
Fenech was true to his word and turned his back on boxing to pursue his other great love, rugby league football. Without the rigours of dieting to make weight, Fenech stacked on 18 kilos and played a few lower grade games for the mighty Parramatta Eels, earning just a few dollars a game. But after copping plenty of cheap shots in scrums from rival forwards, he decided he wanted to get paid a lot more than just pocket money if he was going to be swapping punches for a living. The turning point came in June 1989, when he sat ringside next to his new friend Mike Tyson to watch his stablemate Jeff Harding pull off a classic come-from-behind knockout in the final round of his challenge for the WBC light heavyweight title against Dennis Andres.
It's over! That's the fight! Jeff Harding, the first Australian ever to be the light heavyweight champion of the world.
The astonishing victory rekindled Fenech's desire to win more world titles. So, just 3 months after his retirement, he was back in training. His focus now firmly set on facing the mighty African, Azuma Nelson. Needing to gauge exactly where his skill level was after his flirtation with rugby league, Fenech was set the task of battling it out with Mexican Mario Martinez, one of the best super featherweights of the 1980s never to win a world title. He faced the great Julio Cesar Chavez and fought Nelson twice, knocking the African down in their first encounter.
When I knocked him down in the 6th round, I felt like a winner and the crowd made me feel like the world champion. I don't know what happened, but the decision favoured him. I'm not saying I won the fight clearly, but I believe I still won by 1 or 2 points.
The Mexican's big punch was his left hook, which he threw the way a cane cutter wields a machete, trying to cut opponents in half.
Well, Martinez is prepared to stay and fight with him. He wants to stay inside, but Fenech showing much quicker hands inside.
The fight proved largely uneventful in the early stages. Fenech was at times subdued, but boxed well.
He's certainly looking pretty good early as he unleashes an attack now on Martinez.
One of the most intriguing things about boxing is its great uncertainty. Disaster looms with every single punch thrown.
Shot from Mario Martinez, just casual on the ropes, Jeff Fenech. What a sight to see Jeff Fenech on the canvas. He's only been down once in his career against Mark Parkeroon. He got up to destroy Parkeroon. Let's hope he can do this against Martinez.
He was just doing it so easy, and all of a sudden, boom, he went straight down, but he got up pretty good, and it was never a problem after that. But I suppose it was a bit of a wake-up call that we all may have needed.
It was a left punch, right in the jaw, I thought. When he fell down, he was almost knocked out, but unfortunately I couldn't finish him off. I couldn't knock him out because he was a great boxer, very experienced and very strong. But I had the satisfaction of going to Australia, to his home, and fighting a boxer considered one of the greatest at the time, and sent him to the canvas and almost knocked him out.
Tonight he's just showed superior boxing ability.
It was a true measure of the man, in that Fenech was able to brush off what was a devastating knockdown, and within just a few minutes, he was once again dominating the contest.
This is the Jeff Fenech of old, sore hands or not. He's just going after Mario Martinez. He's going to hit him with everything. He's going to give him a last round to remember Peter Peters.
Fenech's diversity was on show for all to see. While Martinez continued to press for a knockout, the Australian utilised his underrated boxing skills to cruise to victory.
Brilliant performance. What a rumble. Jeff Fenech 12 rounds over Mario Martinez.
It was a comfortable decision, but less comforting was the state of his hands. Their fragility was again evident, the pain etched on Fenech's battered face.
Look at the face on Jeff Fenech.
This guy's phenomenal, Grant. Just what a warrior.
Well,
a few weeks later, he underwent delicate hand surgery, and in January 1990 became a father for the first time with the birth of his son Beau. While Beau was learning to crawl, Fenech readied himself for an assault on world title number 4. With Azuma Nelson setting himself for a challenge against lightweight legend Pernell Whitaker, Fenech was scheduled to face Puerto Rican veteran Juan Laporte for the WBC super featherweight title in Sydney in May 1990. But Fenech was counted out by a bout of glandular fever, and the fight was cancelled.
In the dying seconds of the fight.
Having failed in his challenge for Whitaker's world lightweight crown, Nelson came to Australia as Fenech's replacement and defended his title against Laporte, coasting to an effortless victory.
Great performance. Azuma Nelson certainly showing some fantastic boxing skills throughout the bout.
Injuries and illness would keep the Australian out of the ring for 14 months. When he eventually returned to pound Canadian John Carlben into submission inside 4 rounds, ring rust was plainly evident.
The referee's looking very close. I think the referee's going to have to stop it. He stopped it, it's all over.
However, Fenech's steely resolve to pursue a 4th world title remained. Azuma Nelson was promoted by the larger-than-life Don King.
The war on the shore, which turned out to be a bubble in the surf.
With his famous electric hair and bombastic ways, half the fight was cutting the deal with this masterful negotiator. It was a challenge Bill Morty took up with relish.
I quite enjoy, as long as you know to play him on a loose rein. He'd rather rob you for $1 than you earn him 1,000. That's the way he thinks. That's the street mentality. But you enjoy his company.
After months of haggling, the clash for the WBC super featherweight crown between Azuma Nelson and Jeff Fenech was set for June 28, 1991 in Las Vegas. The co-main event featured Mike Tyson in his last fight before his sensational rape conviction. Amid the glitz and glamour of the world's most extroverted city, with the high rollers gambling fortunes on the roll of the dice, Fenech and Nelson were 2 down-to-earth sluggers, determined to earn their money in the hardest possible way. Nelson knew it would be one of the toughest fights of his career.
When you talk about intelligent in the ring, he has it. When you're talking about speed, hand speed, Jeff Fenech have it. There's nobody in the world that can punch fast and heavy like Jeff Fenech.
Fenech also had the utmost respect for the African, but believed he had the style to beat the defending champion.
But I was very confident, and I'd spoken to Johnny about it all the time, and I'd watched him on tape, and I knew that he'd never fought anybody that fought like Jeff Fenech. Really nobody. They watched me on tape, and they thought that, oh, we can beat this guy, or we can hit him, we can move, but they didn't realise how good I cut the ring off. And I think that in a couple of the American magazines, they mentioned that I was the best in the world at that time at cutting the ring off, and maybe one of the best ever pressure fighters, and I knew that if I put pressure on Azuma Nelson at that stage again, like I said, I'd never been hurt. I'd been knocked down once, but never really hurt, and I still felt invincible. So I thought to myself that if I can put this pressure on this guy, he's going to fold.
Although he'd had a few health problems in the final weeks of preparation, Fenech was primed for the biggest moment of his career.
We're getting set for round 1, scheduled for 12.
In sweltering conditions, under a huge canopy in the Mirage Hotel car park, a crowd sprinkled with Hollywood movie stars was about to see the best pressure fighter in the game sharing centre stage with a cunning knockout artist.
Nelson cannot complain that he doesn't have a target in front of him. I keep repeating, it's awesome to see a guy standing right in front of Azuma Nelson.
Early, the fight went according to script, as Nelson's class took a leading role.
Fenech, who fights on courage and raw power. They're trading heavy body blows right now. Hard shot by Azuma Nelson made Fenech wave in the breeze.
A right by Nelson that tagged Fenech in the head.
No question about it. He felt that. He felt that all the way down to his legs, did Fenech.
It was me getting into the groove. Azuma Nelson's a great fighter. And I think that the commentators said that I'd lost the first and second round. But no, the first round was close. The second round, I thought that, you know, he hit me a couple of times, but I was just getting into position, ready to do what I have to do. And, you know, before you build a house, you've got to put the foundations down. And I think that if anybody thought that I could just go out there and have my way with such a great fighter from round 1 to round 12 the way I did with everybody else, they were obviously kidding themselves.
But Fenech was slowly upping the tempo.
There's the best punch by Fenech all night.
That's the best one. There's another one real hard. That one shook Azuma.
And the crowd feeling that maybe Fenech had Nelson on the ropes.
He didn't have on the ropes, but he certainly wobbled him. He certainly wobbled Azuma. Azuma's in a defensive stance on the ropes, taking everything that Fenech wants to get.
Fenech continues to press the attack. Big turnaround round here for Jeff Fenech of Australia.
And by the middle stages, he was set for a prolonged attack.
Digging into the ribs is Fenech. Now he goes upstairs.
The Africans' hopes of wiping out the Australians' challenge early evaporated like their sweat in the dry desert air.
Now back comes Azuma Nelson.
And that's what you call fighting off the ropes. 4 or 5 hammering shots from Azuma Nelson. But Azuma has been taking a pounding as Jeff Fenech is taking this round.
Jeff Fenech is so strong. He's so strong that I cannot even get out from the corner. And I don't want to stand there with him like that. But anytime I try to come out, I mean, he showed at me, you know, he's too strong. He's too strong to me, with me that I cannot even come out. So I have to decide to stay there and fight there.
He's landing 2, 3 to 1 and impressing the judges. He's on the offense, but look at this.
Back comes Nelson. He turns him around. And back comes Fenech.
And back comes Fenech. What a display of guts on the part of both men.
For the most part, the fight could have been fought in a phone booth, as both let their fists punch in numbers, seldom witnessed at any level of the sport. Fight referee Joe Cortez was quite content to allow the sustained action on the inside to continue.
Fenech never runs out of gas
or evil intention, and there they are on the ropes again, and it's Fenech's round again.
Well, the rule says if they're not tied up, you let them punch out of it, only when there's excessive holding and clinching. And in this particular fight, there was no holding. There were more punches thrown on the inside, and fighters who like to fight on the inside are very pleased sometimes when they see me come, because they say I'm not the kind of referee that goes in to break them up every 10, 15 seconds. The arms are free, I let them fight. And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Fenech looks like one of these wind-up dolls is going to do this all night long.
A human windmill.
Yeah, it's like those batteries, that ad for batteries.
That was after the bell, and that really irked Fenech. But it was difficult to tell, really tough to blame Nelson. It sort of came midway.
Yeah. Let's listen.
You're getting beaten after the bell. You've got him, mate.
And in the words of Johnny Lewis, you got him, mate. The bell sounding, but Nelson is not yet ready to resume. I think they're looking for the mouthpiece. It's buried in the bucket.
By the 9th round, Nelson was fighting from memory. Sensing he was exhausted, the champ's wily trainer, Buffalo Martinez, appeared to misplace Nelson's mouthguard.
I have never seen anything that inept. I have never seen. They look like they're fishing for crabs in the bucket.
Very bizarre. He found it.
The ensuing search allowed the weary Nelson extra time to regain his composure. But that was literally belted out of him by the methodical Fenech.
Ever since the end of the second round, it has been all Fenech.
Not for one moment was he about to let up.
He's got Nelson backing up again.
And buckling. Backing and buckling.
Fenech all over Nelson.
In the closing seconds, only his enormous fighting spirit kept Nelson in touch with the conscious world.
Ozzy fighting from memory, but it's now history.
What a fight!
In the 12th round, when the bell went and we shook hands, Ozzy was in my hands. I held him up. I stopped him from falling. Had I been that old cranky guy from earlier on, I would have just thrown him on the floor. But I appreciated the occasion and the fight so much. Yeah, all I wanted to do was embrace with him and you know, and feel special with the guy because he was such a great fighter.
The last round, I mean, as a warrior, you know, I stood on my feet because like it can take me out in the last round. Definitely won the last round, no question about that. But from first going in, that's what I'm saying. I'm not the referee, but I know the fight could go any way, either way.
It's one of the oldest cliches in the book, but Nelson was literally saved by the bell. And another famous boxing saying, "We was robbed," was about to ring true for Fenech.
114 to 114, a draw. The decision is even a draw.
Oh, goodness, that is mind-boggling. And look at the reaction by Jeff Fenech. He is in total disbelief. No way, he says. It's a draw. So the champion, Ozzy Nelson, getting the benefit of the doubt from the judges here. And Ferdy was right on the button. He said, you never know here with these
It appeared just about everyone, except two of the three judges, thought Fenech had done more than enough to win world title number 4.
You won it. I had your head, but as the man standing next to you, promoter Don King, just said, this was one of the great fights we have seen. No question, your courage is unquestioned. Your boxing ability is encouraged. No question, I never saw a guy with the energy you've got. Now, Don King is one of the premier promoters. You just said something to me.
Yes, I said this is too good a fight. There is no loser. This fight has got to be a return match.
And you just said, let's do another 12 right now.
Yeah, I'll do it now.
You'll
Put the gloves on, let's do it now.
You thought you were ahead of this fight.
And you was ahead.
Well, in the last round, you fought so tough that it looked like you thought you were desperate to win, but you were actually ahead.
I'm desperate to throw punches all the time. That's my plan. I don't taper off. I don't try to slow down because I'm winning. I'm not like that. I want to win right till the end, and I thought I'd done that.
Let me tell you, you have only fought in American television twice. This is one of the premier promoters in television. Had this guy been fighting on television in America with that style, where would it be in popularity?
It would be soaring, but we're going to make sure it gets into that style because we're going to let them play the delayed tape. But I'm going to tell you something, Jeff. You fought excellent. There is no loser. I told everybody in the country that will listen to me this was going to be the vintage fight of the evening, that you were a Tasmanian devil, a thunder from down under, that you would come in for a war, and a war you fought him. Can't nobody question that.
All right,
12 complete rounds of fighting.
All right.
I'll come back and fight him in 2 months, as long as I'm the main event here.
Jeff, I'm sorry that you had this unpleasant event, but let me tell you, one of the hearts in America of the boxing public. Don't go home with your head down because you did fight a wonderful fight. Let's see you again.
The WBC Super
Even the president of the WBC, Jose Suleiman, was floored by the decision.
I was very embarrassed when I saw that decision because there was not the slightest doubt in my mind that Jeff had won.
You were embarrassed?
I was embarrassed because whenever you see something going wrong, whenever you see someone like Jeff putting his heart, his enthusiasm, his thinking of victory, and doing everything to win, and then see that the judges didn't see him win, and they issued a draw, I believe, it was so sad for me, because there is nothing worse than injustice.
But I still went out there and I totally dominated Zuma Nelson for at least 9 out of 12 rounds. I mean, the more I watch the fight, the more easily I win it. I'm not sure what a Zuma Nelson says, but the one thing that when you're in a fight with somebody, you always know at the end of the day who wins. You know who gets punched in the face more, who gets hit more. And had it been 15 rounds like the old days, I would have knocked the Zuma Nelson out without any doubt.
I think that night they not only robbed him of the World Championship, I think they robbed him of his heart and soul. I think that was all left in that ring in Vegas. I don't think we ever saw the real Jeff Fenech again after that encounter.
Such was the outcry over the verdict. The judge who scored it for Nelson never worked a fight again.
He voted for Zuma. There were comments by Jose Suleiman and many people saying it was a terrible decision, and Donati resigned, and he has never judged a world title fight ever again. So I think he was a very honorable man. In fact, he was one of the best judges I ever knew. But he had a bad night, and I think he was so ashamed of that performance that was it.
Fenech has his own conspiracy theory regarding judges.
If somebody looks after you when you go away and stuff, and all of a sudden, yeah, they've chosen you to referee or judge for a certain promoter, and you go there, you're in a 5-star hotel, you're being fed, you're being, like I said, sent your little presents late at night, you know. It's very difficult to go against that person. You ever heard the old saying, you don't bite the hand that feeds you? It's very difficult for these guys. That's why there should be no contact with promoters. That's why there should be no dinners with anybody else. That's why they should get there the day of the fight. That's why they should get there and just sit there and officiate. No talking to trainers or this. They should just go to the reading the rules, hear the rules, ask what they want, go and be locked away and go and referee or judge, and that's it.
Perhaps surprisingly, Bill Mordy was one of the few in the Fenech camp who wasn't surprised by the decision.
I couldn't have possibly judged it. I didn't think Fenech lost it, and I didn't think Azuma won it. Naturally, our opinion was on Australia's side, but I was quite happy to get the draw. I really was.
To this day, Nelson refuses to believe that he lost his title in the ring, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
Jeff Fenech can throw a lot of punches, and most of the punches that he throws, the people behind him, they cannot see the punches that I'm blocking. You know, so whenever I block the punch, so far as he throws, they know that it's gone through. You know, so the judges are the people who are saying that I'm blocking the punches. You know, and that's why I believe that I'm sure that I won the fight.
He might call himself the professor with all these boxing skills, but it's the scoring system is punches that land. They don't have to be hard, they just have to land. They have to land on the scoring parts of the body. And I mean, listen, watch the fight. I know that my punches land, and Azuma knows how many of my punches hit him. I mean, if they didn't hit him, if he caught him the way he said he caught him, I just wonder why he couldn't walk at the end of the fight.
Perhaps that may have been due to his other excuse.
Yeah, 3 days to the fight, I was down with malaria. They took me to, they sent me to some clinic. I was there. They gave me a drip. You know, I was there. They gave me a drip for a day.
Can I ask a question? A doctor wouldn't know if you had malaria. We're tested by doctors. We're tested there. I mean, if a doctor or if his corner put him in the ring with malaria, they should be banned from boxing for life. If he was allowed to fight, in a fight suffering from malaria, then those guys who put him in there should be banned, should be barred for life from boxing with malaria. That's a pretty serious thing.
Sharing Fenech's scepticism was Bob Sheridan, who's called thousands of fights, including the famous Ali Foreman Rumble in the Jungle.
After the fight, Azuma Nelson said he had malaria. Well, let me tell you something. I've had malaria, and there's no way you can slip malaria by the doctors before the fight. He didn't have malaria. He got beaten. He got out-hustled. The ring was cut off, and he was out-slugged. He was a master boxer, was the Professor Azuma Nelson, but that night was maybe the greatest night of all the fights that Jeff Fenech had. Certainly the greatest night I ever saw Jeff Fenech fight, and he beat Azuma Nelson.
They say the true test of a champion is how he deals with adversity. Fenech was now obsessed with fighting Nelson again. The irony of all this was that he'd become more popular for not winning. It was as though an entire nation was sharing his pain.
I came home as a bigger hero, as this huge hero, and that's when my life started to change, being compared to Don Bradman and Dawn Fraser and all this stuff, and after a while you start believing all that crap. Although I regret the changes today because I don't really like that person, because I was big-headed. I thought that I was some superstar. And when I think back to that Jeff Fenech, I don't like him. When that happened, I lost my way.
With his focus dulled, he started looking elsewhere for satisfaction.
Although I trained, Graham, I slept with girl after girl. Listen, my wife knows. I used to sleep with 3 or 4 girls every single day of the whole preparation. I was having 6 showers a day and whatever, and training and trying to muster the energy to spar. I just thought, Graham, honestly, I thought that it would be a continuation of round 12, 13, 14, and I would stop the guy. But again, credit to Azuma Nelson, he went home and he's the president, he's the president of Ghana. Azuma, don't go to Australia and get knocked out. We don't want that to happen to you. I'm going to go there, I'm going to knock him out.
In Ghana, nobody give me a chance that I'm going to win that the second fight, because of the first fight, like you said. But hey, with Azuma Nelson, when you talk about boxing, anything can happen.
After a warm-up fight against Miguel Francia, the long-awaited rematch was set for March 1, 1992, at Princes Park in Melbourne. As the build-up continued, the fight had all the excitement of a football grand final. Melbourne was abuzz, and the African arrived with his entourage for final preparations. To Fenech's legion of fans, the bout was just a formality. The Vegas decision would be exposed as a farce, and the true WBC junior lightweight king would be crowned. But the challenger's preparations would be set by problems.
I thought I was Superman, and Azuma Nelson came loaded with kryptonite. Like I said, he worked. Whereas I trained, but I didn't train with that intensity. I didn't train as the killer that I was. I didn't train, I was doing appearances every day, the Tui's Big Blue. I was, doing things with girls, going to dinners, just brought out a range of clothing, leather clothing, jackets. It was a party for me.
While Fenech partied, Nelson was training the house down. He'd promised to make the Australian vomit in the ring.
There's no way I can fight Fenech 12 rounds in Melbourne, Australia, to win decision. There's no way. If he can stand on his feet, I don't believe that I can win the fight unless he's gone down.
The boxing ring can be a very lonely place, but for Fenech, that feeling of isolation began even before he arrived in the ring.
I was in the dressing room on my own where I got injections. The first injection that my doctor put in my hand went through the top of my knuckle, out the bottom of my knuckle, into my other hand.
With all this happening just prior to making his way to the ring, it was no wonder Fenech looked to be in a trance during the opening round.
2 American judges and 1 from London, England. Good right hand, and Fenech is down. Fenech is down. The count is up to 4 and 5, and Fenech is really surprised by a first round right hand thrown by Azuma Nelson.
In the time it took for Nelson to land one mammoth right cross, Jeff Fenech was finished as a great fighter. The champion had him down again in round 2, and although Fenech rallied in the middle rounds, the rage was gone.
That's a hook, right there it is, right there it is.
And down goes Fenech for the 3rd time of the fight. He was just waiting for the moment.
For Nelson, redemption was at hand.
So open, Steve, he had to take advantage, and he did. Azuma Nelson to the attack.
Wait a minute, Ozzy McCanny steps in, and it's all over. It's all over.
His corner threw in the towel, Steve. They threw in the towel, and it was all over. He said it was going to be over in round 7. He missed by 1.
Azuma Nelson knocks out Jeff Fenech here in the 8th round of the Fenech corner. Threw in the towel.
The great novelist Norman Mailer once wrote, "No physical activity is so vain as boxing. A man gets into the ring to attract admiration. In no sport, therefore, can you be more humiliated." These words could very well have been written about Jeff Fenech. In a fight he was expected to win, he had been humbled. There seemed to be no end to the depth of the devastation he felt.
You know, when you walk around and you're the king and you're unbeatable and nobody can beat you, and then you realise that, yeah, I wonder what people are going to think of me now. You know, it's a hard thing to live with, especially in our sport. It's an individual sport. It's not like you play footy and lose a game and, you know, you had a bad game or the team didn't, you know. It's, you know, you're on your own, and that made it really, really difficult to live with.
But further humiliation was to follow. 15 months after the second Nelson fight, Fenech faced former featherweight champ Calvin Grove. Desperate to rekindle the fire within, on the outside at least, the old cockiness and swagger was still there, as he offered Grove a mouthful of rice custard, even though the American was half a kilo over the limit. But behind the scenes, Fenech had lingering doubts, and an absent mind has no place in the square ring.
I really thought I could regain my hunger and just get that title that I thought that I was owed. I was lying to myself, because the gym was never quite the same. It wasn't the same as the good old days. I was still in the gym, you know, finding it difficult, not to train, but, you know, finding it difficult to, you know, to live with the fact that all of a sudden I'm getting hurt in spars now, and, you know, I'm feeling the punches that I never used to feel. But I always thought to myself, this was my mentality at the time, is when I step back into the office, it'll change, you know. But it never did. You know, got back in that ring and it really never changed.
Left and right by Fenech, and now
Early in the fight, Fenech was a bundle of aggression as he tried to outmuscle his rival.
left and right. Oh, look at Grove. He starts the patsy. Fenech hits him and pushes him out of the ring. And, well, Calvin Grove showboating. And if he's going to showboat to Fenech, he's going to end up on his backside.
But the timing wasn't there. And in round 7, a hammering blow from Grove had Fenech down for the count.
Oh, big right hand with a magnificent right. Jeff Fenech is down in round 7. He's out to it. The fight's over, and so is the career of Jeff Fenech, knocked down in round 7 by Calvin Grove. That came from nowhere. Look at Calvin Grove. Fenech still out, and down and out is Jeff Fenech. What a magnificent right from Calvin Grove, and Jeff Fenech down, out, and the great man's career is over.
So, like many great champions before him, Jeff Fenech had gone out on his back. The viciousness and brutality that he inflicted on so many opponents had come full circle. He said he'd never fight again, but he'd become lost in a fog of self-delusion. 2.5 years after that shocking defeat, Fenech returned as a lightweight. Wins over journeyman Tito Tovar and Mike Juarez hardly enthralled even the most loyal Fenech fans. Still, he negotiated a deal to fight for the IBF lightweight title against a young unbeaten South African champion named Philip Holliday. holiday was no picnic, and in round 2, Jeff Fenech's career came to a shuddering halt.
And that is a huge right hand that has Fenech down for the second time in this fight.
The fight was finished, and as a fighter, so was Fenech.
The towel has come in. Jeff Fenech has tried to kick the towel out.
The legacy most fighters leave to their sport is often very similar. Men from humble beginnings use their fists and a hunger born of poverty to become world-renowned sportsmen. Along the way, they are corrupted by fame and fortune, only to spend their lives overshadowed by faded memories of a distant glory. But this was never to be Jeff Fenech's destiny. The respect he gained in the ring during a magnificent 12-year professional career, which led to his induction into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, can never be questioned. Even today, he is universally celebrated for his unique talents.
Mexican means courage, determination, try to go forward all the time and never give up. And you know, Jeff Fenech resembles to me, the heart and the temperament of a Mexican, because he was that type of man. He came in the ring to fight. He came to tell the others, be careful, I'm going to destroy you. And he did.
Jeff was just such an animal. Probably one of the toughest and roughest kids that I have ever been involved with in my life. Work in the other corner or either work in his corner. He's an exceptional human being. I've never known a kid who he actually thrives on knowing that he can fight through pain and the sacrifice and suffering that he had to go through to make weight for his fights. Where a lot of guys would really, be ashamed of it and say, man, it was horrible. In fact, he loved it. He's a very unusual human being, and I would actually say of all of the champions I work with, which is probably about 29 world champions, he may be the natural toughest kid that I have ever dealt with in my life.
Despite flourishing business interests, he remains close to his beloved sport as a leading trainer of young fighters.
If this is flat, that's all we get. When this is up, boom, we come down on it.
Instilling in them the passion, dedication and sacrifice that drove him to the top. In retrospect, it's been a life filled with ups and downs.
You know, I've had a lot of bumps and stuff, but the bumps have made the end of the ride really enjoyable. You know, when you get off that roller coaster, oh, that was scary, and that was, it's made it more enjoyable, because if everything's smooth and everything just falls into place, sometimes you wonder, do you deserve it? But I know I've worked hard, and I know that I've ridden that roller coaster, and I know that I've had plenty of detractors out there and plenty of guys that saying, oh, Jeff's this and he's that, and look, I still have them today. I still have them today, but like I said, I've got nothing bad to say about them people, because those people motivate me. They're the people who keep me on top, Graham. They're the people who make me keep achieving.
Jeff Fenech showed us that in life, if we really want something badly enough, if it is the stuff of our dreams, we should chase after it with all our might. Attack our task relentlessly. Never give up, and never take a backward step.
Face was slashed in a vicious gang attack overnight. 7 reporter Robert Ovadia is there. Rob, what did he have to say?
Simon, the 3-time world champion, was actually quite upbeat when he arrived here at Prince of Wales Private Hospital, probably about half an hour ago now. Surprisingly upbeat given his condition. I mean, he was wrapped with a bandage around his head, quite a lot of blood on the right-hand side of his face. And he was basically lamenting the state of society these days. He said the attack was entirely unprovoked, and the fact that young people are so willing these days to inflict such violence on other people. He believes that he was specifically targeted because of who he is, and said that the exchange at first was a light-hearted one, and thought the men in the car who attacked him were actually just having a bit of a joke around with him, until it started to turn a bit nasty. There was a fight. and Fenech said that in the middle of that is when he was actually hit in the side of the head with what he thought was a bottle. So he's arrived here for surgery in good spirits, but possibly will be needing a skin graft or something like that later on today.
Rob, any idea of what doctors have said about how long he may have to stay in hospital?
It's early days yet, Simon. It depends on whether he's going to be going under local or general anaesthetic. The likely scenario is that it will be general anaesthetic. It is quite a bad gash on the right-hand side of his face. He says that an actual chunk of flesh has been removed from his head, which was beneath the bandage today. Again, depends on general or local anaesthetic. We hope to have some sort of word from the surgeon who will be doing the operation in the next 3 or 4 hours or so, but it's likely that Mr. Fenech will be on his way to the operating theatre certainly in the next half an hour or so.
Rob, thanks for your time. We'll have more on the Jeff Fenech story in the 10:30 news later in the day. Well, gas restrictions on South Australia's major...
During a street brawl in Sydney South, he was attacked by 4 men in front of his wife and friends outside his restaurant at Brighton Le Sands overnight. He arrived at Prince of Wales Hospital a short time ago.
Yeah, it's upsetting that these young guys of today don't really care about what they do. It's fine if somebody punches you, but when they have to pick up a bottle and do what they've done, it's quite sad.
He'll undergo surgery this morning. It's been the worst Christmas...
It's going to be taken off this morning.
Jeff Fenech injured, former world champion, speaks about gang attack. Tripper world boxing champion Jeff Fenech has fronted a hospital to face surgery after having his face slashed with a broken bottle during a street brawl in Sydney South. He was attacked by 4 men while out with his wife and friends outside a restaurant at Brighton Le Sands overnight. He'll undergo...
I feel sorry for the guys, to be quite honest, mate. These kids, they need help, mate. They need somebody to sit down and talk. They need to learn to go and punch a punching bag or something like that, rather than float the streets waiting to punch into somebody else.
He'll undergo surgery this morning. A plan to release asylum seekers into the community appears set to...
...from going into surgery after he was assaulted overnight outside a Sydney restaurant. He says he was confronted by 4 men and slashed across the face with a bottle.
Jeff Fenech says his attackers knew exactly who they were up against.
Had it not been Jeff Fenech, I'm sure the guys would have continued to fight with me, but because it was Jeff Fenech, they knew that they weren't going to beat me using their fists, so they used something else.
The 39-year-old world champion says he was standing outside this restaurant south of Sydney when a car pulled up beside him. Fenech says he originally thought they were having a joke.
It got more and more heated, and one of them threw a DVD out, one of them yelled out about a gun, something about a gun. And
one of the men allegedly pulled out a bottle, hitting Fenech across the side of the head.
And I've got a chunk like that size out of my face. It's going to be taken off this morning. It's just at the moment it's just been pushed on, sitting on there.
He's undergoing surgery at Sydney's Prince of Wales Hospital.
What do you do? It's done now. It's going to go in there and hopefully these guys, he'll be able to, like I said, repair quite a deep wound to my face.
Tim Hutchison, 7 News.
Australia has recorded it.
The morning after a shocking night for Jeff Fenech, which turned ugly when he was approached by 4 strangers.
Turned into a fight, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden, I remember quite clearly seeing the stub of a bottle in somebody's hand that he had just clobbered me to the side of the face with.
The triple world champion will undergo surgery today for the gash to the right side of his head. He is at a loss to explain the reason for the brawl.
It didn't seem bad to me. Like I said, I didn't think they stopped to have a fight at the start.
He'd just finished dinner with family and friends at his restaurant in the southern suburb of Brighton Le Sands. Fenech's children and their grandmother had already left for home when the fight erupted in front of his wife, Susie.
If you can't go to a restaurant and have a good night, where are we safe these days?
The 39-year-old says he has a good description of his attackers and has passed on the number plate of their car to police.
I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to go and tell the police which guy hit me.
Despite the blow, the shirt worn by one of Australia's greatest ever boxers seemed very appropriate. Jason Neuenhoff, National 9 News.
Australia has recorded one...
Sydney. After leaving a restaurant where he dined with family and friends, he became the target of 4 men who attacked his face with a bottle.
Able to afford a limousine to hospital, Jeff Fenech has paid a high price for fame. His head wrapped in bandages after being attacked by 4 men, one wielding a broken bottle.
Because it was Jeff Fenech, they knew that they weren't going to beat me using their fists, so they used something else.
Dining with family and friends last night, the former boxing champ claims he was playing the perfect host, meeting and greeting patrons at his newly acquired restaurant in Brighton-Le Sands.
These guys just stopped, and I thought it was a joke at the start, and I was talking to them. There was not a problem.
In the brawl that followed, Fenech was hit at least once with the bottle.
Jeff was just left there the way he was, actually, with just a piece of flesh just hanging from his face.
This morning he underwent plastic surgery.
Removed a portion of his cheek just in front of his ear.
Jeff Fenech's career as a restaurateur had only just begun. He bought into this business 2 weeks ago with his new partners, hoping his fame would be a draw card.
He was signing autographs, you know, wishing everyone Happy New Year and stuff like that. It was just a beautiful night that was spoiled like that.
As Fenech checked out of hospital this afternoon, police hinted they were closing in on his attackers. But the law may end up the least of their worries.
If it means I've got to get in trouble, then I'm going to get in trouble, because I've got to go and front my attackers myself, and that's what I'm prepared to do.
A high-powered task force has been set up to ensure the delivery of gas to industry in New South Wales.
Surgery after the vicious street brawl.
Down for the count. 3 times world boxing champion Jeff Fenech checks into a Sydney hospital for urgent facial surgery. Fenech was fighting off 4 unknown assailants outside his Brighton-Le Sands restaurant last night when one of them stabbed him in the cheek with a broken bottle.
I remember quite clearly seeing the stub of a bottle in somebody's hair, and that he had just clobbered me to the side of the face with.
The fighter turned top boxing coach was playing host to family and friends at the restaurant he bought 3 weeks ago when he was confronted at random by the men who he initially thought were out for a bit of fun at his expense. Then the jibes turned into jabs, the former world champ holding his own until he was glassed.
Yeah, it was pretty cowardly, and then when the bottle came out, that was even more cowardly.
The broken bottle cut him to the bone, taking a chunk of flesh from his cheek.
It's always the case, you know what I'm saying, you know, they can never fight one-on-one.
He may have beaten the world's best during his career, but the Marrickville mauler had little chance in a 4-on-1 melee. The ex-street fighter wonders what wounds his assailants are nursing. The day after the attack, he'd like to meet them again in a police station.
They got no remorse. They don't really care whether you're male, female, whether you're Jeff Fenech or whether you're Billy Bloggs. As long as they at home now celebrating that they cut me, that's what they would be doing.
Fenech's already provided police with the number plate